Good morning. I'm Matt Ewalt. I serve as Director of Events and Live Journalism for the Texas Tribune. Thank you for joining us here in person in Dallas and online for our conversation with North Texas lawmakers about the 2023 legislative session. Today's program is moderated by my Tribune colleague, politics reporter James Barragan, and we're joined by Representatives Giovanni Capriglione, Victoria Niave Criado, and Chris Turner. I want to thank today's sponsors. Our event is presented by Texas State Technical College and Lone Star College. Our major sponsors include Educate Texas at Communities Foundation of Texas and Raise Your Hand Texas. Though corporate sponsors and donors underwrite this event, they play no role in determining the content, speakers, or line of questioning. And we're also grateful to the Communities Foundation of Texas for hosting this morning's event. Before we begin, I do want to take a moment to thank our Texas Tribune members joining us in person and online today. If you value events like this and you're not yet a member, please consider supporting the Tribune. You can head to texastribune.org/donate. The Texas Tribune Festival is happening in downtown Austin this fall from September 21st through 23rd. Join us for a program full of big thinking conversations headlined by names you know and others you should. Learn more at tribfest.org. And just some housekeeping notes about today's program. We'll have about 45 minutes for our conversation with 15 minutes for questions from the audience. Please do silence your cell phones, and if you'd like to tweet from this event, please use the hashtag #TTEvents. And now, to begin today's program and introduce our panelists, here's our moderator for today's event, James Barragan.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to all of you for being here. We have a very exciting conversation on a very eventful legislative session that is still going, and we might be having a couple of overtime rounds after this, if and when this gets resolved, I guess. But here to talk about, we have three great state representatives from North Texas who will be familiar to all of you. To my immediate left is Chris Turner. He's a Democrat from Grand Prairie, has served Tarrant County in the Texas legislature for 6 terms, and he serves as vice chair of the redistricting committee and on state affairs and on the Ways and Means committee. To his left is Victoria Niave Criado. She represents Texas House District 107, which includes parts of Dallas, Mesquite, and Garland. She serves as chair of the House County Affairs Committee. Is that? Yep. And is a member of the Business and Industry Committee, and she's also the chairwoman of the Mexican American Legislative Caucus. And to her left, on your far right, is, just like he likes it, Giovanni Capriglione. He's a Republican from South Lake, has represented House District 98 since 2013. He currently serves as chair of the Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services Committee and serves on the Elections, Youth, Health and Safety, and Select Committees. And Gio Capriglione is also my nerding out buddy on tech and finance stuff. So as Matt said, we'll do 45 minutes talking about this very eventful legislative session, and then we'll set up, we have these mics set up on either side that you can see, and you all can ask questions. We do ask that you please stick to asking questions and not have your own soliloquy at the mics. I will sort of keep you in check if you go too long. So think about your questions, get excited to ask your questions, but we do ask you to keep them brief and concise so that we can understand them and answer them better. I think that is it. I do want to remind everyone again about support for the Texas Tribune. You know, at this time, it's more important than ever. You know, we've been around for, we're going to be around for 14 years now. We've got a new editor-in-chief, we've got new CEO, a lot of new things coming. And if you like the work that we do, if you like these events that we have with these lawmakers, please consider supporting, and you can do that at texastribune.org/donate. And we hope to see some of you at the Texas Tribune Festival in the fall. Okay, without further ado, let's kick it off. The legislative session. What a ride. What a ride. You all expelled a member of the Texas House for the first time since 1927, and then voted to impeach an attorney general for the first time in history, and that was just the final month. So let's talk about these two events. Historic events, and I'm doing the setup here, but very serious historic events. How did you all sort of think about sort of making those decisions as you were having to make those decisions? I mean, those are tough decisions. Not a lot of lawmakers have had to do that. Representative Turner, we can start with you.
Great. Well, good morning. Thanks for putting this on, and thank you all for being up early to have this conversation with us. I think that both events you're right, were extraordinary and historic because they hadn't happened really in anyone's living memory. Certainly not an expulsion and an impeachment, not of a statewide official in anyone's living memory. But I think in both cases, the House did what needed to be done. In the case of Mr. Slayton, there was a very serious complaint that was filed with the General Investigating Committee. The committee did an investigation. They were thorough. They were meticulous. They provided opportunity for due process, and the evidence seemed pretty compelling, and that's why there was a unanimous vote in the House to expel him, and that was, I think, the right course of action. With respect to the impeachment, I think I'm glad it finally happened. As someone who's been calling for a long time for this Attorney General to be held accountable by the legislature for a variety of his misdeeds, I think that it was overdue, and it was more than warranted. And again, I want to give credit to the committee, the General Investigating Committee, that operated on a bipartisan basis, was very thorough, and it was very professional. The fact that they kept this under wraps, so as to be able to complete their investigation and bring the information to the full House in a very professional and organized way is a real credit to their work. So again, I think what needed to happen happened, and I think that the overwhelming bipartisan vote you saw in the House is a reflection of the fact that people have a lot of concerns about the Attorney General's behavior, and now he'll have his chance to have his trial in the Senate here in the coming weeks.
Representative Niava-Criado.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and for having us. And I will say first, with respect to the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, it was a decision that we took very seriously, something that we were trying to be thoughtful about as the evidence was being presented to us. And I think the striking thing is that it was a bipartisan vote, and the overwhelming majority of the House voted for impeachment. And so it was 20 counts, as you know, of different acts. And so I just want to say that the important thing is that we were trying to be thoughtful as that was being presented to us. With respect to the representative who was expelled, sexual harassment, and I know you've reported on this throughout the years. We've had legislation on these issues, sexual assault, sexual harassment, throughout the years. And the Me Too movement really sort of helped shine a spotlight on what was going on all across the country. The legislature, the House, even implemented policies several years ago to address sexual harassment and sexual assault in the workplace. So for us as women in the Capitol, for girls who are interns in the Capitol, we want to make sure that not just under the dome, the pink dome, but outside as there are events occurring, that folks know that there are rules that must be followed. And so the fact that we took such an extraordinary step, one, the acts were egregious. If folks read the report that I believe is available online about what happened in this particular circumstance, the General Investigating Committee's recommendation to take such a extraordinary action of expelling a representative shows how egregious this action was, and was a message to future generations that this type of action will not be tolerated in the House. So even though these were really, really sad situations, I think that it showed that we come together on issues, Democrats and Republicans, to show what our values are in the House.
Thank you. And Representative Capriglione, we have two Democrats here who were calling for the impeachment of Attorney General Paxton. Before it was cool, we can say. A little bit of a more difficult situation for you as a fellow Republican.
Sure, and the whole way here, I was hoping this wouldn't be the first question. For me, even though we use the same buttons to vote, it turns out as doing this, you knew it was different, right? And for a lot of us, it was about making sure of sending a message in a way too, that no one is above respecting the institution, no one is above the law. And at least in the first case on the expulsion, that was, quite frankly, something that none of us had talked about or even thought about at the beginning of session. But it is important to send the fact that we are going to respect the institution, we're going to respect our employees, we're going to respect Texans by holding people accountable, especially when they violate social norms, workplace harassment, and so on. So that one was unanimous, and I think everyone had agreed that that individual had wronged the state and had wronged his employee. But the impeachment was more difficult. As a Republican, of course, I've known the Attorney General for a long time. I've endorsed him in his races. But also in that case, as the evidence was presented, it really did all start after the election. I know some people talk about, well, the voters voted for him. I don't think anyone's above the law, whether you're elected or you're not. We're held to a higher standard, and that standard was set. It was breached, in my opinion, and I think we voted because there was sufficient evidence that it should go to a trial. I think he's going to have his opportunity in his day in court, and we'll see what happens now.
Thank you. Just to linger on this issue a little bit more in terms of the expulsion of Representative Slayton, and if some in the audience may not know, he was expelled for an inappropriate sexual relationship with a young staffer. And Representative Niavi-Criado, you talked a little bit about the work that the House had done and that lawmakers had done around sexual harassment. But the House had also, in legislative sessions past, had also implemented new rules that you're sort of talking about. Did that sort of, for the three of you all, did that sort of weigh on you in terms of, they are social norms, as Representative Capriglione noted, but they also were like, the House had addressed those. There had been issues in the past, and the House had said, hey, these are the rules, had put training in place to say don't do these things, and yet this person chose to continue to do them, even having gone through the training and having the entire legislative staff gone through the training, the entire legislature. Did that weigh on any of you all?
I think when there are complaints that are brought forward through the process that was put in place, and the General Investigating Committee investigates, interviews, they hired outside counsel to put together a report and conduct the due diligence necessary. I think those rules worked to ensure that we have a safe workplace for all employees. And so I'm proud of the House's actions on that and for being willing to take such an extraordinary measure as that to send a message that that type of behavior is absolutely not acceptable in the House.
Okay, and then I did want to talk about the impeachment on one more issue, which is that according to the General Investigating Committee, the reason the impeachment was set off in the first place was this $3.3 million settlement in the whistleblower case against Attorney General Paxton, which is that the 4 whistleblowers who reported all these alleged crimes to the FBI and other authorities sued in Texas court, and they eventually reached a settlement for $3.3 million for the 4 whistleblowers that had to be approved by you all as legislators. That's what set this whole thing off, according to the committee. But where does that leave the whistleblowers? And I wonder what you all think of the paying of the whistleblowers? Because as I understand it from covering the case, you're either going to pay the $3.3 million now, or this thing plays out. I mean, so, and if the resolution is that the Attorney General is guilty in the whistleblower suit, you'll pay it out then. So what is your thinking in terms of paying the whistleblowers and sort of what this does for future whistleblowers? Because their lawyers have that concern that this could affect future whistleblowers in reporting alleged crimes. Capriglione, I see you nodding over there, so we'll start with you,
Sure.
and we'll come this way.
Well, I mean, for me, I mean, the reason we have the Whistleblower Act is so that any employee, any state employee, or any government employee who sees or feels that there's been waste, fraud, and abuse in the government will be compelled and will not be afraid to disclose that, because that's in the public interest. And if that person or those individuals are terminated because of something that reported that was accurate, showing that fraud or abuse, then they should be compensated, right, for what had transpired. What happened in February was the Attorney General had asked basically for us to approve taking over $3 million of your dollars and paying them and not getting the information that came out. And that didn't make any sense. And so for me, now that there's a trial, there's going to be opportunities for everything that the whistleblowers had said to come out, to be vetted in public and in trial. And to me, after that, if it turns out that they were accurate, or at least that they had discovered that and they were terminated, I would say unlawfully because of that, then they should be paid, so that other employees who see that will feel that confident that they're doing the right thing and that they won't be left out to dry.
Thank you. Representative Nyavi-Criado, do you have thoughts on that?
Sure. So as an attorney, I've litigated whistleblower cases. And one of the things that we want to ensure is that there is no chilling effect from this. I don't know the terms of their settlement agreement. I would assume that it would likely continue through the litigation process. I'm not sure if they're in pre-lit or litigation stage yet, but the important thing is that people are willing to report to law enforcement. That's part of what the statute requires before, and then if they are retaliated within a short period of time, usually if they report in good faith and are retaliated against, terminated, or there's some other unlawful action, adverse employment action against them, then they do. That's why the statute's in place. So we want folks to report if they see crimes in government, if they see other wrongful acts, so that there is an opportunity to remedy that.
Right, but in terms of the actual payment to the whistleblowers, how do you think through that?
I mean, the statute's there for a reason. So at some point, the government will need to, if it knew or had knowledge of that person's actions, then that's why it's there.
Representative Turner?
Yeah, well, bottom line, I would like to see the whistleblowers be compensated when all this is resolved. And I realize it's not going to happen as quickly as perhaps they thought back in January, because the legislature didn't appropriate the funding to fund this settlement. But I do want to see them compensated, and I think ultimately they will be. But what the legislature cannot allow to happen, and I think this is why the committee launched its investigation, is accept that a whistleblower claim that results in a settlement by not just a state agency, but in this case a statewide elected official, be used as a device to conceal facts and conceal misdeeds from the legislature and from the public ultimately. And that's the process that was set in motion. That's what the Attorney General apparently wanted to happen, was to pay this settlement out and make it all go away. And the facts that the committee laid before the House a couple of weeks ago in the impeachment proceeding clearly indicate that this is not something that should have just been swept under the carpet. This is something that we needed to shine a light on and the legislature needed to act on it. The public needed and deserves to know about it, and it warrants a trial in the Senate, which is what's going to happen. All that said, none of that may have happened were it not for the courage of the whistleblowers and for them doing the right thing. And they certainly deserve to be thanked for that and given credit for that. And hopefully, at the end of the day, they will be compensated as well.
Thank you. Let's talk about other historic things that happened this session. The budget surplus, more than $30 billion. A lot of money to go around, harder for the appropriators to say no to a lot of people because the money was there. Everyone was very excited about what we could do with this money. And yet, the biggest thing that the top leaders in the state wanted done, which is property tax relief, did not get done. How did we end up there? And where do we go here on property taxes? Because I know it's an issue for both parties. Really, it's not like one party's for property taxes being high. So, Representative Turner, let's start with you. I mean, how did we get here, and where do we go on property taxes?
Sure. Well, yeah, if you told me at the beginning of the session that one of the things that would not have gotten done would be property tax relief, I would not have believed you, because as you said, it certainly is a bipartisan priority for members of the legislature, and clearly it was a top priority as stated by the leadership in the state.
The governor ran on it.
Absolutely, he did, and I think the governor and lieutenant governor both spoke about it in their inaugural addresses back in January. So it is really shocking that this is still up in the air, and so I think that you have obviously some different viewpoints on the best way to achieve property tax reduction for homeowners and for businesses. And it didn't get done in the regular session. The governor, in calling the special session, was extremely prescriptive in what he wanted the legislature to do. And I think the House reacted to that and did exactly what the governor put on the call and nothing further, which is why the House passed last Tuesday, I guess, a bill just to do property tax rate compression, and obviously the lieutenant governor has a different point of view, and so that's where we are. I don't know how that's going to get resolved, and the Senate comes back in today. I think the lieutenant governor's having a press conference later today. I have no idea how that's going to go. So I don't know what the next step is, but hopefully, ultimately, I hope that homeowners in my district, I hope, will see a meaningful property tax relief in whatever form it takes here before too much longer, because it is an issue that I certainly continue to hear about in my constituents.
Do you want to get back in there for another special session on property taxes, or you think this is it?
Well, I think that the governor's indicated we're going to have more special sessions, so whether I want one or not, I'm afraid we're going to have one.
He's not calling up Chris Turner to see if he wants another?
He has not, no. But I think that the bill we passed in the House, I think, will provide significant property tax relief, yes. I think other ideas out there, including a homestead exemption, would also provide relief. In some cases, would provide more relief. And it just depends on the type of property you own, the value of the property you own, what kind of relief you're going to get. But I think that my preference would be a plan that combines property tax rate compression and a homestead exemption increase. I think is the best mix, but that's not what the governor asked for on the call. So that's not what the House did.
Representative Navicreato, a slightly different question for you. You all did pass in the House the rate compression bill as the governor asked. As a Democrat, was that a hard vote for you to take? Because that would affect school property taxes in the future when we're not as flush with cash as we are this year.
I can tell you, regardless of party, one of the biggest things that we hear when we're knocking on doors, talking to our community about folks, is property taxes and how high they are. And so it is certainly an issue that both sides of the aisle want to address. For us, we have House rules that we comply with, and the bill that was before us complied with the governor's call. And so with that being said, that's what we passed and that's what we had to vote on. And so I think, if there were other plans, the Representative Turner, who serves on Ways and Means, and I know that y'all looked at different proposals that were brought before the committee and the House. But from what was in front of us, for us, we want to deliver property tax relief for our community. And I think the House stood strong and united in sending and passing that legislation and putting it in the Senate's court.
Representative Capriglione, is there a concern, same question to you, about, a couple of years down the road on this rate compression, if that is the way the legislature chooses to go, if the Senate, which it doesn't look like they want to, but just for gaming it out, like just to have that discussion, is there a concern that in future years when we're not as flush with cash, that could affect school districts and schools?
No, I mean, if you start with where did this surplus come from, it came from Texans, right? I mean, if you look over time, at least over the last couple of years, we've seen the economy rebound. We've seen oil and gas, so severance taxes have done better. We saw federal dollars. We supplanted a lot of those dollars. So we have the surplus. But a big portion of why we have a surplus is because everything costs more than it did just a couple of years ago, right? As your costs have gone up and inflation has gone up, then our percentage of that is higher as well. So what we want to do, and we're going to do, is return this money, a large portion of it. Now, to be clear, in the House, we have voted for almost every single version of property tax. Like, we have tried multiple times. We had the cap version, which would change your maximum cap of 10% increase. We voted for a 5% cap, which, at least in DFW area, would be huge, right? Because we've seen those valuations just increase year over year. We took that bill, and when the Senate wouldn't pass it, we took the Senate's bill with Homestead and added it to ours. We still didn't pass that. And then in a special session, we went for straight out compression. I believe, given inflation, given the economy of Texas, we'll have those dollars in the future years to hold those ISDs and to be able to hold them harmless effectively with these. If you look at another bill we passed 4 years ago, HB 3, which is kind of the same model, but maybe a little bit smaller, we've been able to easily put those dollars in for compression. And so I feel confident we'll be able to do that because, again, the goal is to continue to compress those property taxes lower and lower, effectively to zero at some point.
Let's talk a little bit more about the budget and just get into the good, the bad, and the ugly. What were some of the things that you liked and perhaps think that there could have been more money spent on? And we'll just go down the row here with Representative Turner.
Sure. So I think that one of the good aspects of this budget was some increase in higher education funding. We saw a $700 million increase to general academic institutions across the board, which is significant and helps fund some priorities in higher education, as well as pretty good funding for our student financial aid programs, our two main programs, the Texas Grants and the TEOG program. Around 70% funded. I'd like it to be 100%, but 70% is pretty good compared to where it's been in recent years. And then, of course, for institutions such as Texas Tech, University of Houston, University of North Texas, and Texas State, this new fund that the voters will have a chance to vote on in the fall, but presuming it passes, it's going to establish a $3 billion fund for them, similar to the permanent university fund that the A&M and UT systems have access to. So I think in that sense, the budget was pretty good for higher education. Now, some of those additional funding increases were tied to some policies I don't like. They were tied to DEI, a DEI ban passing, which is completely unnecessary and I believe is going to be harmful to higher education in the state of Texas in the long run. It was also tied to the the 10-year bill passing. And so those were obviously not budget items, but very much interrelated, and I think those are bad things for higher education. If I had picked one negative on the budget, that's easy. There was no increase in public education funding, no increase in the basic allotment, and no teacher pay raise. And that was a huge, huge failure.
Representative Neave-Criado?
I would have said everything he just said. The one thing I would add is an amendment that Representative Turner had actually on the budget to expand Medicaid. And so healthcare access post-COVID, ensuring that, Texas is the #1 state in the country with the highest number of uninsured. And so I think that was a missed opportunity.
Representative Caprillo?
Right. So you had said what we could have spent more money on. I mean, I think in reality, we have spent a lot. We increased funding in a lot of different areas. And if you look at mental health care and institutions, if you look at overall across the board, we've seen increases in programs and much needed services. Obviously, for appropriations, it's about prioritization, right? There is still only so much money, but I guess in agreement with the other folks, I wish we had, this section of the budget, 2 sections, one for property taxes and one for school funding as TBD. Looking forward to working on that over the next couple of special sessions, because I think whether it's teacher pay raises, basic allotment, and property taxes, those are still super important, and I think is the only part that's still left to be done.
You all are touching on one of the items that I want to discuss next here, but it's public education and what happened there in terms of figuring out pay increases for teachers and that how that all got mixed up with the new school choice push that the governor and others in the legislature have newly embarked on. Well, I say newly for the governor, but others have been on this campaign for a long time. So, how did this all happen? That's teacher pay raises got mixed up in this fight over school choice, and what do you all see as the resolution? Should those two be even tied together, or are those two very different things that we should be talking about separately? And anybody? Go ahead.
I'll go. They shouldn't be, but whoever did that was very strategic in their approach. And I'll just give y'all a personal example. So I was born and raised here in Dallas. I grew up in Pleasant Grove. I would have gone to Comstock and Spruce for high school. And so my dad came as an immigrant and met my mom, and they scraped and saved to put me in private Catholic school. I, for high school, commuted all the way up here to North Dallas to Ursuline Academy of Dallas, and it took me about an hour to get here from Pleasant Grove, the barrio part of Pleasant Grove. And so our families shouldn't have to, regardless of your zip code, you should have top quality schools. And that's why our neighborhood schools, our public schools, and investing in our public schools is so important. I know that not every family in my neighborhood that I grew up would have been able to pull that off. We know that the voucher program would strip funding from our public schools. And so that is a big fight. I think the House on a bipartisan basis rejected that multiple times. And so although I know that there are constant attempts to try to bring back different iterations of a voucher scheme, for us, ensuring that the dollars are in our public schools is really, really essential. Doesn't matter what zip code, you should have the best schools, you should have quality teachers, you should have safe schools, and so that's why we're fighting so hard to keep the dollars in our public schools.
I think looking at the landscape of the new school choice pushed by the governor, my sort of thinking looking at it is just as a reporter was that, the House had beaten this back so many times, and particularly rural Republicans had beaten this back so many times, but that perhaps there would be a sort of limited path to get there. I think the House proposed some type of limited path, but the governor came out and said, no, we will have it available for every school child in Texas. Do any of you all see more limited path where you could get on board on this school choice push? We'll start with you, Representative.
For me, no. And I think that the limited path I think you're alluding to, that the governor came out and opposed, what was a bill that was going to be laid out, or I guess was laid out in the House Public Education Committee. But it was never clear to me if that would even have had the votes to get out of the committee, much less get out of the full House. And so, my philosophy is, it always has been, that more than 90% of Texas school kids are in public schools, and public schools is where our public dollars should go, and like Representative Niave-Corrado, I had the opportunity to go to both public and private schools. I went to a Catholic school through 8th grade, St. Pius X here in Dallas. And but that was a choice my parents made and paid for. Is not something that the taxpayers should be asked to pay for, because private schools, by their very definition, have the ability to pick and choose who they accept. They have the ability to pick and choose how they do instructions. They have different. They don't have the same sort of accountability system that we have in public schools. And the fact is that our public school districts, are there challenges in districts around the state? Absolutely. Of course there are. But our public school districts, I think, have made tremendous strides in providing meaningful choices for parents and students. And in the two districts I represent, Arlington and Mansfield ISDs, they both have state-of-the-art career tech facilities. They both have state-of-the-art fine arts academies or special instruction, and a variety of other choices available. Early college, high school, and STEM programs. The list goes on. And so the fact that there isn't the statement that there's not choice out there is just simply not accurate. There are plenty of choices out there, but those choices are provided within the context of public schools, and I would add charter schools also, which are public but different. And we've seen a tremendous growth in charter schools over the last couple of decades. So there's a lot of choices out there, but we need to invest in public schools, which is where more than 90% of our 5.5 million school kids go to.
Representative Capriglione, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. To me, we've never had a real voucher vote, at least in my time during the session. We'll have kind of a soft test vote. And I would say, from a voucher perspective, the worst that I ever saw the vote was last session, how much of a gulf there was between the yeses and the nos. And I would say that probably this session was the closest it ever had been, that test vote. So I think there is a lot of desire from the public and from legislators to do something when it comes to ESAs. That being said, these are two different subjects to me. Okay, I think the ESA is something that we should be able to have a vote, a standalone vote. My opinion, one of the versions that had come out, it may not have been able to get out of committee, but that was at least a vote that I thought had a chance of passing in the House. Separately, though, the reality is we have a lot. Just in general, when it comes to teachers, we have a shortage of workforce. We have morale problems. We have pay issues. We have benefits issues. So I think we do need to address that for all of those students in public ed.
Okay, I want to talk about guns because we just passed the 1-year anniversary of the Uvalde Elementary School shooting, and there was a push by State Representative Tracy King and by multiple senators, but a big one I think was Senator Roland Gutierrez with their push for the raise the age for assault rifles to 21. It didn't seem like that was going to have the votes in a Republican-dominated legislature. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was that when push came to shove at the end of the day in the committees, and it was I think like on the deadline day for the bills to get out of committee, two Republicans crossed over on the committee to refer that bill forward. And that's where it all ended. But is there anything, and I know there's this conversation every time there's another mass shooting, but for you as Democrats, Representative Capriglione, you as a Republican, is there anything that you all see as, there's a possibility for change on this kind of policy given what happened this session?
Well, I think we have to continue working to create the change. It didn't happen this session, and I think that's a tragedy because I think we've seen, unfortunately, so many mass shootings in our state. Uvalde being the one that's just, they're all unimaginable, but Uvalde is especially unimaginable with 19 kids killed and 2 teachers killed. And so I think that, you look at the partisan makeup of the legislature, you look at where the votes are, and you say, well, it didn't happen, and what's going to change? How can it happen? We have to continue fighting to create the change. And look, and I think that the fact, as you mentioned, that 2 Republican members voted to advance that legislation in the committee, that's very meaningful. That is significant. And my understanding is there were other Republican members who would have supported that on the House floor had it made it that far. But I think that you look, whether it's mass shootings or the fact that you have, gun violence, every single day throughout our state, and a lot of times it doesn't make the headlines, doesn't make the TV news because it's not a mass shooting, but you still have people being losing their lives or having their lives tremendously impacted by gun violence. We can't just say this is the way it is. We have to, I think, raise the age. I think we have to close background check loopholes. We have to have some version of a red flag law to get guns out of the hands of people who are dangerous to themselves and to others, and a variety of other reforms that should be considered. I think we have to keep fighting for that, and we have to keep pushing to create that change.
Of course, the governor has said that a couple of those proposals he thinks are illegal. I think raising the age to 21, I think he says would be unconstitutional, and I think maybe he's waiting on red flag laws as well. If any of the other panelists want to get in a word on that, we also will start taking questions in about 2 minutes. So if you would like to prepare, mics are on either side.
I'd like to add, throughout the legislative session, we've had an opportunity to visit with and spend time with the families from Uvalde. And I have hope. I'm an optimist, so I think I just continue to hang on to that hope that change will come, James. These families that would drive down from Uvalde every single week to meet with legislators. We had a chance to drive down to Uvalde on the anniversary of the shooting, and to see their community there, locked in arms, supporting the families of those who were lost, but also the children who survived, was really, really powerful. And we carry that with us as we vote in the House, as we talk with our colleagues about how a vote to raise the age can keep a community safe. These families have so much strength and perseverance, and so it is up to us as a community to really raise our voices with our state representatives, our state senators, and even to our counterparts at the federal level about the need for change. It's time that we do something, and we owe it to them so that things like what happened in Allen, Texas, don't continue to happen all across the state over and over. Gun violence is the #1 killer of children and teens in our state. That data is similar across the country. We have to come together, and I really commend our colleagues on the other side of the aisle who were willing to step up and buck the party line to take a stand to vote in favor of raising the age. And I believe that there are more of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle willing to do that if that vote was put before them.
Okay, we'll start off with questions. We've got one over here, so we'll knock that one out, and then we'll move over here. But feel free to ask questions on this side as well.
I was just closer to this side. It's fine. So I'm Christina Etry, and I work for Scholarshot. We support first-generation low-income students transitioning to college. So with the elimination of the DEI programming now in post-secondary, how do you think that will impact the persistence and the success of first-generation students going forward?
I'm happy to speak to that. As the chair of the Mexican American Legislative Caucus, we are the largest and oldest Latino caucus in the entire country. We also have the highest number of Latina legislators of any legislature in the country. We worked hand in hand with the Texas Legislative Black Caucus and our allies in the Democratic Caucus and others to fight with everything that we had against that legislation. It's really shocking that in today's era that there's legislation to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion. What we share with but again, we have to have hope, right? Because our numbers continue to increase at the colleges and universities. And despite this being pulled away and taken away from us, we have to continue to push our students to go to college and take alternative measures to ensure that our numbers do not decrease, and also that we have professors who are diverse and of different viewpoints. So we just want to continue to push our students to reach that next level of to achieve higher education. We've also had corporate, Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 500 company executives in our office, and we've shared with them, the chambers, about there's legislation going after higher ed right now, but next, is it our city government? Is it our private businesses? We know that diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are at many top companies. It helps the bottom line. And so I just think folks need to be ready for that, because this is just the start of attempting to eliminate the progress that we have made as people of color in different industries and levels of government and education, and just the successes that we've had. We are now, Latinos are the majority in the state of Texas. And we need to ensure that everybody is going to be educated regardless of the color of your skin. And this really narrative about this reverse racism is really concerning. We need to be embracing diversity, not trying to get rid of it.
Thank you for the question. I'll get right back to you, but I did have a sort of tangential question for Representative Turner. With these pushes on the DEI bans, the push on ending tenure, we saw last legislative session, the CRT bills. Is there a concern for you as a person who's worked on higher education issues about, a beginning of questioning of the independence of public higher ed institutions in the state, when the state just keeps pressing down and keeps pressing down and keeps pressing down and limiting the things that they can do?
Yeah, it's of great concern. I think that throughout the debate on both tenure and DEI, you had a number of faculty leaders and others in higher education warn that this will potentially have a chilling effect on recruitment of faculty to the state of Texas. It could have a chilling effect on recruitment of students to our Texas colleges and universities. And then how this plays out in terms of the instruction and the campus experience that students have, I think is an unknown at this point. And like my colleague just said, we have to make sure that every student in this incredibly diverse state, this majority-minority state, has the opportunity to be successful and succeed on our college campuses. But measures that are passed by politicians to restrict, academic freedom of thought, the embracing of diversity, the the practice of inclusion and equity, those policies potentially have very long-lasting harmful effects on higher education long run. So I think, the good news is we increased some funding, long overdue for our colleges and universities this session, and that was a significant step forward. I do fear that some of these policies on DEI, tenure, and other things could be a step back. So I think we have to be vigilant about that going forward.
Thank you. Question?
Good morning. Great discussion. My name is Matt Lagos. I'm a realtor here in focusing on Dallas and Collin counties, and I'm glad to hear, Representative Turner, that you're for increasing the property tax exemption and on tax compression, because I know, of course, the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker are on different odds on this issue, so I'm glad to hear you're supportive of that. My question is related to House Bill 3555. Two of the members on this panel were co-authors on that bill, Representative Turner and Representative Caprioli, related to what they call taxparency when it comes to school district taxes. My understanding is this is the third session. It's authored by Representative Plaza and Jeff Leach from Collin County. Why is this not moving forward? It seems that taxpayers, if we're trying to get us tax relief, that we'd want to know what percentage of our taxes are going toward recapture. Is it the appraisal districts? Is it the taxing entities? What's not letting this move? It got stuck on calendars this session, so.
I think I was an author of the bill maybe 1 or 2 sessions ago, and so for me, I do think more information about where your tax dollars are going or where they're not going is important. At least the way that I had originally written the bill is it would come in on your appraisal district report, right, where you would be able to see exactly where those dollars were. It's always had challenges. I mean, and I would say I've tried passing a lot of transparency bills. They don't all make it. There's one apparently still trying to find its way to the other chamber. So sometimes it's just difficult to do some of those things. But I mean, what I really hope, to be blunt, is that we finally pass this property tax bill, which will lower recapture for every school district. And ultimately, if that's what happens, at least I saw the original runs of the first vote. I mean, it would be a significant reduction to recapture all of the bills that we've discussed. And so I'd rather, given the choice between those two things, I'd rather pass the property tax cut and lower that number to as low as possible.
Thank you for your question. It's good to know that the legislature is not just a black hole for me sometimes, but also for you guys. I see you over here. I'm going to get to the 2 people over here, and then we'll come back to you. We've got about 7.5 minutes, so keep your question short.
All right.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is January Fox. I am with Prism Health North Texas. We're a system of clinics that serve the underserved and folks who lack resources in a lot of ways, both medical, dental, behavioral health, and pharmaceutical as well. Texas has a big maternal mortality problem, especially with Black women. This session, we were able to pass a bill that expands services for mothers from 2 months to 12 months, but that has to head to CMS. There was language that was added towards the end that could possibly be inflammatory. So I wanted to hear y'all's thoughts on how you think that will be received by CMS, and if you think it will be, it's passed, but accepted by I
Can you talk about there's some abortion language, abortion-related?
Yeah, there's something about House Bill 12. I think I can answer that real quick. So you're talking about House Bill 12 by Representative Tony Rose from here in Dallas, and Representative Rose has worked on this for a long time. And the legislation does extend Medicaid coverage postpartum from the current 60 days to a full year, 12 months. It was a priority of the House, it was a priority of the speakers. And last 2 years ago, it passed the House, the Senate cut it back to 6 months, and then CMS rejected it for at least a couple different reasons. But I think to answer your question, what happened this time is the Senate did put in some language that was problematic to CMS a couple of years ago, but in the conference committee, so that language was modified and moved to a legislative findings section. So it's not exactly in the construct of the eligibility portion of the bill. And so the hope is that won't be a problem at CMS, and hopefully it will be approved.
But it's still up to CMS.
Ultimately, once the governor signs it, CMS has to approve it because it is Medicaid dollars, yes.
Thank you for the clarity on that. Question?
Hi, Paul Ruth, citizen of Denton. I wanted to talk about or ask a question about Senate Bill 505, which I will label the Screw the Electric Vehicle Owners Bill. I did some arithmetic, which is about 8th grade arithmetic on this, and taking a gas-guzzling Ford F-150 or whatever it is, you could drive that 33 miles a day, 365 days a year, and still not pay as much as you are if it's in law now, that you're going to tag the electric vehicle owner with as far as this fee that's being charged, the $200 a year after the $400 in the first year. Citizen Ruth here, who drives a 17 Volkswagen Jedi, gets 33 miles to the gallon. I end up paying about $44 a year in this, the 20 cent per gallon tax.
Mr. Ruth, if you could get to the question.
Okay.
We do have 4 minutes.
All right, yes. I understand the how you did it. I want to know why.
Anybody? Did anybody vote for it?
Is this you're talking about this additional registration tax or additional tax that's paid for electric vehicles that is not there for gasoline powered?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Right. So part of the thinking and the analysis that goes into that is obviously all vehicles that go on the roads go and damage the roads. There's more need to maintain and construct new roads, new bridges, and so on. A lot of that funding comes from a portion of the state taxes you all pay on every gallon of gasoline. That goes into a fund in our budget, a side fund inside of our budget. And so that's what's used in a lot of cases to go and fund some transportation projects. Obviously, electric vehicles also use the roads, also use bridges, also go and require new roads to be built. But because they aren't paying the gasoline tax, this is a way to supplant those funds and have those electric vehicles also pay into the construction of roads and transportation.
Yeah, I think the question. Yeah, I think the question is basically whether electric vehicles should be paying in for infrastructure costs, which Representative Capriglione is saying they should. I think the question from Mr. Ruth is basically about the increase in fees. Is that fair? Which we'll leave it up for interpretation, I guess, and we'll get to this question.
Todd Roskopf. I work as a public policy consultant on issues of transportation. Could you talk about the status of high-speed rail? I know that's come up a little bit, and just want to hear where you guys are at with that.
We've got 2.5 minutes, and as North Texas representatives, I'm sure you all can nail it in 2.5 minutes.
I don't know if I heard anyone talking about high-speed rail this session.
I don't know the latest, but I know that for the past sessions, we as a North Texas delegation on a bipartisan basis have done everything that we can to protect the project, and it's been sort of like an urban versus rural fight. And so I don't know that we had the same battles this session as we have had the previous sessions.
Yeah, agreed. There wasn't, to my recollection, weren't any votes at all related to high-speed rail this session. And we're all completely supportive of the high-speed rail between Dallas and Houston, and hopefully it'll come to fruition sometime.
Answers as expected from a North Texas representative perspective. That is our time. I want to thank everybody so much for coming and give thanks to our 3 state representatives who came out to the event, and remind you to please consider donating to the Texas Tribune if you like these events. Thank you so much for coming.